What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Corner Flag Convos and Chips. My name is Brian. I'm here with my usual co-hosts. Introduce yourselves, guys.
What's up, guys? It's Shevin. What's going on?
Yeah, guys. It's Michael. I'm here again. Miss and Mia.
Of course, he has to add that at the end, especially considering what one of the games that we're going to be talking about is. How are you guys doing? Is everything all right?
Yeah, I'm chilling, bro. This is nice to have like a weekend off of football, considering that we've watched so much football. So it feels good to get like a little break and refresh and come back next weekend with renewed energy, you know?
Fair,
By the
fair.
way, there's never enough football. Just say it. I actually really miss my team playing like this weekend. So and like I really don't like the direction Germany is going in. So I hardly look at their matches.
Okay, then. All right. Well, I guess that's a kind of a good segue in terms of what I was going to ask you guys, because I was going to ask you guys how you guys feel about the international break. How do you guys feel about this break in football? Chev, it seems for you that it's good to kind of get away a little bit. I don't know whether that has to do with Arsenal or not. I know it has a little bit to do with Dortmund for me. So, besides the point, though. But what do you guys feel like with regards to these games? This whole international break. How do you guys feel about it being played the way it is, despite the current pandemic conditions?
Felt like it was a pretty horrible idea to continue scheduling so many friendlies, considering that this is such a short and compact season. Particularly for the European teams, I know they're going to have to play Nations League games, which I honestly I think the Nations League is useless. Like nobody understands the format, nobody really cares. But the fact that there's Nations League games punctuated with international friendlies as well makes very little sense, considering that these players have had little to no rest. In the case of the South American teams, I can understand that they have qualifiers for their World Cup, so their games mean something more. So I can excuse that. But the whole idea of playing the Nations League and two international friendlies during a period where players should be resting and recuperating is honestly quite ridiculous. I don't know if it's because I don't really support any particular national team. Like I'll look at Argentina games for Messi, and I've been recently watching a lot of Netherlands games for Frankie De Jong. But other than that, I just think it's too much football for these players, and you can see the injuries starting to pile up. You know, Joe Gomez went down, Raheem Sterling went down today. So it's been tricky, and a lot of teams are going to feel the squeeze once we kick back off next week again, because Champions League games are going to come hard and fast, and league games are coming hard and fast. So my thing is, why didn't we just give these players one game per international week and let them rest? But that's just me, though.
I generally agree with what Shevin is saying. To me, it is like complete blasphemy from FIFA because, like, how are you going to end up in a situation where you have to pack three matches in an international break? And these aren't matches that we say that you have these matches in a central location and so on, is like all over the place. These players now will have to interact with players from clubs that do not have the financial power to do COVID testing. And from that, a lot of players actually coming back to their teams, like their club teams, with COVID. Like Salah, for instance, and I think Young Min Son had a major scare because four persons from Korea tested positive for COVID. I think that is very stupid with the pandemic because it makes no sense. Why are you forcing people to play friendlies that are basically pointless? So that's one thing. And the second thing is all along before the pandemic, you were playing two matches per international break. Now the pandemic is here and all the seasons are compressed. You're going to end up playing three matches. What sense does that make? That makes no, and it's like two friendlies and then one important match. Why don't you just play the important match and allow the players to have proper rest? But FIFA isn't like that. FIFA really needs to do a lot of work as it relates to these planning and so on. I don't know because you can't say it's a situation whereby they're trying to get more finances out of these matches because there are no fans and it's just broadcast rights. And I don't think that that would actually do a lot for them. But complete idiot is very idiotic from them.
100%. I mean, I feel I'm definitely on the same page as you guys with regards to this whole international break thing. I get that the teams need to get together, and you need to keep that synergy with your team, because apparently we still have what was once supposed to be Euro 20, now Euro 2021 coming up. So I get why these teams need to meet, but I definitely agree. It's it's an issue of playing the important games and then just leaving the international friendlies to the side. Even if you are playing the Nations League, play that game, but there is always that odd friendly in there that really isn't necessary, especially during this time right now. And like you said, Mike, you do end up with a lot of intermingling that you wouldn't have otherwise. Usually it's just the team and the squad, rather the club team, I mean, and their squad staying together, playing other teams in the league or in the European competitions. But with the national team, it's more like you have players coming from every league. And like Mike said, you end up with a situation where they might be coming from a club that either doesn't have the testing, or it's more the regulations in the country aren't as strict, and it just ends up being a lot more problematic. But kind of bouncing off of this, there has been talk because people have been complaining about the international break for quite some time now. The other argument, I guess, is that if you don't want to play the international break, why are we playing these competitions like the Champions League and Europa League? Because of the travel factor. I have my own opinion on that as well, but I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Well, it's the answer is broadcast revenue, like those are the games that sell, and those are the things that people really want to see. And everything is unfortunately going to be driven from a monetary aspect. And we are, no matter what, trust me, the season could have been 6 months long. They're going to find a way to squeeze all 13 Champions League games out of whoever eventually wins the tournament, because that's where the money is. And that's what people tune in to watch, especially in the Western world here. The Champions League is such an easily digestible broadcast for us with the type it shows and the excitement it generates. So, yeah, that's your answer. They want to do it because that's where the money is.
Yeah, I generally agree with Shevin. It is every single thing right now, and the thing is that they're trying to extract so much value from these things using the broadcast because fans aren't allowed. So every single thing now is just centered around pushing as much games as possible.
But from a safety standpoint, is there a comparison to be made? Because I mean, when I look at it, it's kind of in the sense that you have the international break, right? And you have all. I feel like it's a lot more intermingling than even what you would get in the Champions League, basically. So I guess the way I look at it isn't more from that revenue standpoint; it's more from like a safety standpoint. It's more in the sense that you're still with your club team. You're just with those players. And yes, you are traveling to play a team, let's say in Spain or Italy or here or there. But a lot of the time, those players are just with their team as well. It's not as much as you have players from all over coming and then joining into one team. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, 100% the revenue aspect, I'm sure, is a driving factor as well. But moving on then, let's talk about the games that kind of give us more of that revenue drive. So let's start off with Manchester City, Liverpool. So what sort of game were you guys expecting coming into the match, considering each team's run of form, and did it differ much from your initial expectations?
The game was pretty good, I must say, for about 60 minutes. And the game we got, particularly in that first half, is sort of the game I expected to see. High octane from both teams and both teams going for the jugular. You would think that City being at home would be the more proactive of the two teams, but for the opening period, it was actually Liverpool who went for the jugular. They were very much on the front foot and constantly pressing City and trying to swarm them and get into their box. And their aggressiveness paid off when they won that very early penalty. I thought City fought back really, really well from about the 20th minute to about the 50th minute, where they just really took control of the game. They figured out what Liverpool was trying to do, and they really put their foot on the ball and tried to move it around as quickly as they can. And the goal was very, very well taken. Looking back on the way that first half ended, I have to say that I think City should feel extremely unlucky not to have won this game, because they had a great chance that they missed, and then Kevin De Bruyne obviously does that to the penalty. So coming out of that first half, particularly, I feel like City should have been more motivated to go for it in the second half. And admittedly, both teams did try, but I don't know if you guys noticed, but to me, the game just sort of uh, wilted out. Wilted out in the 60th or 65th minute because it looks like the players were extremely tired and they were extremely fatigued and couldn't go anymore. And that's just one of those things that we might see more and more throughout this season, where the consequence of playing so much football with so little time to rest is going to catch up to these players. So I thought we were robbed of the entire spectacle that we should have gotten, but we still had a pretty good game that was extremely exciting for about an hour. I think a draw, both teams, well, Liverpool would definitely feel happier with the draw, but I think coming down to it, City should feel aggrieved that they missed out on the extra 2 points. And because considering that the way their form has been, they definitely needed to get a win right now because Liverpool are about 5 points ahead and City have a game in hand. So a draw does favor Liverpool more, and like I said, City should feel very, very unlucky with the result.
Well, my opinion of the game, I think, well, coming into the game, I expected them to be a little more defensive, in my opinion, because with the defensive injuries that Liverpool had suffered, and also with the defensive frailties of Manchester City, I expected that they would have probably been a little more pragmatic and decide, you know what, the best defense might win this game. But they both of them attacked. It was very entertaining. As Shevin mentioned, up to the 68th minute, it was very entertaining, and then they actually got a little burnt out. But that also introduces a next topic that we may be able to touch on. The Premier League only allows 3 substitutes, and generally the entire other leagues they allow 5, and it's kind of like a disservice to the Premier League that is actually happening because of the situation. But I can understand why the Premier League is allowing it to happen, because the Premier League is basically there as an entertainment spectacle whereby any team in the league can win. Generally, from the top 5 leagues, like from the beginning of the season, you already know 1 or 2 teams that would actually win the league. And the Premier League is completely different because even a team like Everton would have good odds to win the Premier League. So with that now, I don't know why is it that these larger teams are actually like not being able to cope with the 3 substitutes rule, because the reality is that it is not that hard to rotate. They have big squads, and that's the reason why they have big squads. I do believe that they have the ability to rotate. And the thing is that Pep and Klopp mentioned this, that is a big hamper on them, and with them they only made 3 substitution combined, which is very strange. And if you're saying that these players are actually tired, maybe it's a time that you would use all 3 substitutes and you would still have these players tired, but that wasn't the case. So I can't really necessarily lean on their sides with them saying that. But overall, the game was a good game. It was very competitive, a good footballing spectacle when the 2 teams that on paper are probably the 2 best teams in the Premier League come together.
Yeah, it was definitely a fast-paced game with a lot of attacking action. Let's talk a little bit about the standout performers on either side. Did any players catch your eye? Did any look like they were having a poor day on the pitch? Any thoughts, guys?
For me, penalty aside, I thought Kyle Walker had a good game, but I think the standout player from City was Ederson because in that first half, he really saved them from going down more than they should have been once they conceded the penalty. And he definitely kept them in the game for longer stretches of time than they should have. I also felt like when Bernardo Silva came on, City had a little bit of an extra dimension, but the rest of the team just didn't have enough energy. Ruben Diaz played really well in his first major game in England. He looked pretty assured. I do expect a little more from him, considering that the money that's paid for him and the hype he has behind him. And I do understand that he is prone to the odd lapse in being caught out for pure pace, but he looked very strong, very astute on the ball, and he distributed very well. For Liverpool, I wasn't particularly amazed by anyone. Sorry, I expected a lot more from Diogo Jota, considering that he got the start that he's been clamoring for with his performances. I thought Roberto Firmino was especially poor. Trent Alexander-Arnold unfortunately went off injured, so there isn't much to say for his effectiveness there. And the Liverpool midfield in general left a little bit to desire. So in that way, I can't necessarily blame the forward line of Salah and Mane because it just didn't receive the ball enough from the two midfielders or Roberto Firmino, who I thought was very, very, very below par.
I think one person that had a good game, but because the penalty miss, like it's kind of covered up the type of game that he had is Kevin De Bruyne. Kevin De Bruyne did well in creating good chances. He also had the assist for Gabriel Jesus. Yeah, I think he really did well in this game. An next player that actually had an underrated game was Cancelo. Um, I like for the year that he's had in Manchester, like this game here was way above what the levels that he was at during his period there. It was not a good transfer for him because he's been horrendous in the last year and so on. For Liverpool, I think Salah had pretty much a good game in my opinion, but like generally there wasn't anything else. Like Salah and Mane were definitely the two best players from Liverpool, but they didn't really had anything else to show during this match.
Yeah, Mike has a point. I feel like I'm being a bit too harsh on De Bruyne just for the penalty miss, but it was such a bad penalty miss though for a player of his caliber. So that as one thing that sort of justifies me not putting him in the best place.
Yeah, for sure. KDB definitely had a good game. He did have that one really good pass. I believe it was coming off from the right side over to I believe it was Sterling, who almost managed to nutmeg Allison. What's it called with his shot? So I mean, he definitely did have a couple good plays there. In terms of standouts for me, I basically put down both keepers. Ederson and Allison both really had, I think, a really good game. It almost seemed like a ping pong match at times between them because the attacks were so high octane and fast, coming back and forth from side to side, from either side of the pitch, that you know it was almost as if they were the ones that were getting the most touches, and they both pulled off some fantastic saves. So I really think that the scoreline is more than anything down to them. Like, yes, of course, City had their chances that they could have put away, but I do believe that especially for Liverpool in terms of that sense. Allison did play a role in that as well, and of course, Ederson, as we've said, has had a fantastic game as well. So, how important is this result for either side? Would you guys say, and what sort of implications does this have on the title race this early on?
It does sort of not really say much about the title race so far. It is quite early in the season, and from the way we've seen this season has gone, there's so much unpredictability to be had with just the sheer number of games and the fatigue that is going to stack up eventually. So, I think for City it would have been important to close the gap and still keep the game in hand, but I don't think not winning this game was extremely detrimental, but it is hard to say that they're ahead of Liverpool in any sort of favorites discussion. It is still very firmly Liverpool right now in the Premier League.
Yeah, I don't believe it has much effect. Like a lot of persons are talking about like title challenges and so on. You have to wait until probably February to know what the title challenge will look like. Because like this season, there's been a lot of teams that are actually playing very well, and a lot of teams, like underrated teams, are playing very well too. So at this point in time, a lot of those teams you expect that at some point they would have a drop off. And this Christmas period, especially within the Premier League, is one of those periods that you would know what potentially would happen because of the amount of games that would potentially come during this period of time. So like teams like Aston Villa that has been doing really well, Leicester, who's currently on top of the league, and Southampton are really doing well, and they should not be like cast aside, and people keep continue thinking that Manchester City and Liverpool should actually go for this title win because the Premier League, and that was what I mentioned earlier. The Premier League is built on the possibility that any single team could win at any point in time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's pretty early on to see, I guess, what sort of direct what sort of direct implications it would have on the title race in terms of points and all of that, and where people will finish. But I guess in thinking of that question, what I was thinking of more is like what sort of reverberations may it have throughout, I guess, the upcoming games as well. So, I mean, you do have the injury to Trent Alexander-Arnold, which occurred. That's definitely going to have some sort of effect on Liverpool going forward, with regards to their defense, which has already been completely rattled by injuries and everything else that's been going on. But in addition to that, I guess kind of connecting what we were talking about, especially with what Mike said with regards to not having enough rotation going on or not having enough substitutions. I think these are the types of games that really tire the players out. You had both Liverpool and City both trying to get really important points for both of their title bids, if you would like to call what City is doing right now as a title bid. But basically, I feel like these are both the games that will, in some way, tire them out both physically and mentally. They're the games that they try the most in, but they're also the ones that have those sort of implications going forward in terms of the closest rival that could challenge you for the upcoming title. So I think in that sense and in an injury sense, it will, I guess, have some sort of reverberations going forward. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just want to add one thing. The situation with Liverpool's injury problems, I think it was actually common. Like last year, I had mentioned that these injuries would eventually happen. I think Liverpool currently are suffering a burnout. And this is typical of like teams that press really hard, because we saw it this season before Pochettino actually came out of Tottenham, that there were a lot of injuries starting to pile up. And then we're going to see it again at this stage with Liverpool, because the intensity that these matches actually happen at, the possibility of players getting injured is very high. And this situation that we're in with the amount of games that being played, it would not help them in any manner. And the thing is that with Joe Gomez and Van Dijk, a lot of persons, like I was thinking about it today, but I believe that those players, because of how high they go up the field, are more likely to be injured, because they would have a lot of space to cover. When teams getting in press and well, just casual press, they try to compress the game so small that the attackers, they don't really need to make long runs. And the pressure of that is that they, in case if they get breakaways and so on, it leaves upon the defense to cover a lot of area. So Trent Alexander-Arnold, and even today, Andy Robertson picked up an injury. So, like with those two, is the entire defense run into problem, and I think that might be the common link between what is going on. Additionally, I must say too, well, I don't really think that these big matches actually decide who does what or so on with the league title. I honestly believe that if you're a big team, your aim is to beat the smaller teams within the league, and those are the teams that are outside of the top six, and try your best to not lose to the teams that are within the top six. And that has been Jose Mourinho's proven method of doing things, and it has been proven very effective over the years. And I still believe that there is a situation.
All right, fair points all around. So let's move on to the next game that I figured we'd look at. So Manchester United, Everton. So Man United managed to pull Ole once again out of the fire, at least for a time, with a result against Everton. Does this change anything for United going forward? And do you guys think the board will continue to stick with Ole, and if so, for how long?
Honestly, I feel like Ole could lose like 6 games in a row, and he's still gonna get backing from the media because his friends are in the media, and he's still gonna get back into the board. The problem with United and Ole is that, th- yeah, you can sack him, and yeah, you'll see an improvement. Like, let's say you get a better coach like Pochettino, for example. The issue here is that if you sack Ole now, it's November. This season is hell on earth to manage right now. The players like him. The players are used to his training. Sacking him now is going to hurt a lot in the short term, because The new manager that comes in does not have a preseason to fall back on. He does not have the trust of the players as yet. The players don't know his system. And just generally, he won't be able to make a lot of signings or make his signings because now you think about it, Ollie got his signings over the summer. He got Alex Telles, he got Cavani, and he got Donny van de Beek. So trust me, I'm all for sacking Ollie, but I feel like they missed the opportunities to do it. Like, why did he start this season? If Man United really cared about making an upward leap and making progress, he should have gone in the summer. Because then you could give the new coach an idea of what he's working with and what the players are working with. So I think this is a very false result because yeah, they won the game. It's great considering that Everton had a great start to the season, even though they've tailed it off in recent weeks. But we're only like 2 or 3 games removed from another Man United slump. Let's not forget they lost to Istanbul Başakşehir in the middle of the week. So we're only a couple games away from another 2, 3 losses, a draw, 2 losses in a row. Something of the sort is going to send United fans into a frenzy. So yeah, you could sack Ali, but my just overall take is that you missed that opportunity, and if you didn't do it then, there's no point in doing it now. Just try to see out the season for as much as you can. I mean, of course, if it gets catastrophically bad, then he has to go. But I just don't see the sense in doing now what you should have done 3 or 4 months ago.
I personally don't believe that United are going to sack Ole. I agree with what Shevin said. The opportunity to sack Ole was there a lot of times, and United did absolutely nothing. I do. Manchester United has become a very pitiful club. Like it's very shambolic what has been happening, and they've basically tied into this like the United that we know. They've basically evolved into a panic buying team. So like every single thing, let me say that they have a defensive problem. They don't find a player to fit the defensive role. They normally just go and find which player would be the most expensive player and put him in, and that's it. And that is not how you solve problems. And I believe that Ole, he is either one of two things. He doesn't have the tactical acumen, or he's not involved in buying these players. Because at the end of the day, United, I thought that the area that these guys would have actually developed upon is the defensive midfield, and they did absolutely nothing. And like when you look at the midfield is very porous. And in my understanding of football, if you have a very good your team basically is based on how good of a central defensive midfielder you have in your team. And I usually use that as a very good gauge to determine how a team plays and so on. So when it comes to United, they have no proper defensive midfield, and I don't see them going anywhere until they have a proper defensive midfield. Because they don't have no defensive midfield, teams easily bypass their midfield, and you end up running straight into defense. And defenders don't like people running at them, and that is what is going to be a problem throughout. It's kind of ironic that we are highlighting these problems after United won a match, but that is the reality of United of the last few years. Very good attacking, poor in midfield, and poor in defense.
For sure. And I guess to your point of whether or not Ole is involved in buying these players, it doesn't seem like it is, because you look at Donny van de Beek came in for, what was it, 40 million euros? And granted, that's not, a massive sum for a player of his talents. This guy is sitting here and he's starting most games on the bench. You would expect that the guy would at least be in some way involved in the game. And granted, of course, there's things that go on in the background that we don't know. Maybe he's not performing the way he should in training. But it's a little strange to dish out that money, put up so much hype around this transfer, and then the guy's not really involved. So I would assume that in some way, at least at face value, it looks like he's not really involved because he's not really using these players. So there is that.
Yeah, I also want to add this Donny van de Beek transfer made absolutely no sense in my opinion. Like, why would you bring a next attacking midfielder? You have Bruno Fernandes, which is the guaranteed starter. In worst case scenario, Paul Pogba can play that role also, and Fred could be a ball carrier for you. Like it didn't make any sense then, and it doesn't make any sense now. And that is why I'm telling you, Manchester United needed a central defensive midfielder, and there were a lot of them on the market. Arsenal brought Partey in. Truth be told, Partey is not like a completely defensive midfielder, but he can do a job in the role. And the thing is that Arsenal got him for like 50 million. That's like 10 million more, and you got somebody to actually solve a problem that you have. And the thing, when you look back at the week before, Arsenal used Partey and basically run through the entire midfield of Manchester United. So it's very straight, and it's not a situation like, for instance, you had like, if you didn't want to spend a lot of money this window, you had people like Sumare, that the Sangare, sorry, that would have been a good pickup. Then you got players like Yves Basuma, you have ND, if you actually want to spend money, that would have done a job for you and ensure that defense is not exposed as it is currently. And it really don't make any sense to me.
Yeah, Michael has a point. Like, there's no direction in the transfer policy, and there's no like common sense attached to it. And you can clearly see that there's a disconnect between what the player wants and what the boardroom wants. Because, okay, take for instance Edison Cavani. United knew that they wanted a striker because they were not going to extend Igalo, and they wanted somebody to back up Anthony Martial and to also serve as an alternative in situations where they would need one. Edison Cavani has been a free agent since June. He told PSG he's not returning on his contract. He wouldn't sign the small extension to play in the summer. Fine. Edison Cavani has been home since June, resting, available, asking for transfers. Why did he come in on deadline day? You know, if you knew that was your target, if you knew that was the position you were looking for reinforcement, and that was the particular guy you wanted, why did he come in on deadline day? He could have started the season with United. He could have had an entire preseason with the team. Anthony Martial has started the season terribly. Think about how much more, maybe how many more points they would have had if they had a fit and adapted Cavani in the starting lineup. So there's no direction to the transfer policy, and there's no common sense in, as Michael pointed out, recognizing exactly what's needed. Luke Shaw has been terrible for the better part of 2 years. Why is a left back coming in? No. You know, there's no point in, yeah, Alex Telles is a good player, but what's the point in signing him on deadline day when this has been an issue for 2 years? And like I said, why did he come in earlier in the season? Van de Beek, I've heard that the reason for his signing is that United understand that there's a possibility, not a possibility, there's an extreme likelihood that Paul Pogba is done at United and he's going to be the guy to fill in for him. But at the same time, Pogba's been in horrible form, and Donny van de Beek still cannot even get on the pitch. So they need to figure out exactly what's going on with their transfer strategy, because it's greatly humbugging what they can actually get done on the pitch, because there's so much disconnect within the squad, and on the pitch the performances are so inconsistent for a reason.
And just one final note on Manchester United. Paul Pogba clearly wants to leave. Now, instead of Paul Pogba sulking, because clearly with the drop in performances that he's had during this season, because like, for instance, the tail end of last season, United were very good, very effective and so on. So now Paul Pogba actually tells the public that he wants to leave. The best situation for you at this point in time is to say, you know what, Real Madrid, you want Paul Pogba? All right, here, give us XYZ, or go to PSG and say, PSG, you know, Paul Pogba is a good player, fit your niche, give us XYZ. And you can now end up taking Paul Pogba out that will leave at some point in time and start building a team for the future. And like it doesn't, I can't see the logic that United uses. And it's very intriguing, because like, what is the direction that they're really going in?
For sure, and I guess talking a little bit more about Pogba specifically, I mean, you did mention that he is signaling that he does want to leave. His quote to the media, which came out today, was because he was talking about his time with the national team, obviously, because everyone's on international break. He goes, and I quote, "This is a period I've never experienced in my career. The French national team is a breath of fresh air. We are very happy to come here. It's not the same with the club. We all group together. It is magical." So with what he's kind of saying here, it almost seems like there may be something else going on at United in terms of the squad as well. So could some sort of unrest within the squad also be playing a role in their performances right now? What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, in terms of Pogba, like, yeah, it's great to have like a breath of fresh air here and there with your national team, but Pogba himself has been pretty lackluster, and he's the one that's been pretty bad on the pitch itself. So I think that if it was coming from somebody who was playing well, I would have cared more about what he had to say. But at the same time, you're the one that's not performing. You're the one that needs to step up on the pitch. This the United squad last over the summer during the Project Restart. They looked like a very harmonious group. With the young English players Rashford and Greenwood really clicking together, and even guys like Brandon Williams finding their feet in the team, and Bruno Fernandes just brought so much fresh air to that team. So that's a quote I would take with a lot of grains of salt, because it's coming from a guy who's been one of the key villains in this current United slump.
I didn't like. I can't really read anything. Pogba's clearly what, but you see, it comes back to a problem that happened when Mourinho was there and Pogba was behaving like this. Everybody had a problem with Mourinho. Mourinho has left. The problem's still there. Maybe, just maybe, Pogba is the problem.
Ooh.
Taking shots directly at the team. Well, that's what I like to hear when we're talking about United.
No,
You guys
but
know that.
Michael has a point though, because how many excuses are you going to make for Paul Pogba? I like Paul Pogba; he's a great guy, and I think he's coming for a lot of unfair criticism over the years, particularly from guys like Graham Souness is a meme with this whole Pogba thing now, but people became so protective of Pogba because of people like Graham Souness that it became taboo to criticize him. It was so fun to criticize him that people realized, hey, this is so unfair. Let's just make it completely taboo to criticize him. But he's been pretty abject this season, and I understand that a couple bad games in a row or maybe 2 bad months doesn't necessarily make you a bad player. But this is a high pressure situation. He's supposed to be the best player in the team. He's not playing like the best player in the team. So at some point, you have to be accepting of criticism of Paul Pogba, and I just frankly don't think he's been that good. And a move away from United benefits both parties, in my opinion.
I think we can definitely agree on that. I definitely feel that Pogba and Pastures New could potentially be a permanent breath of fresh air for him, shall we say. But before we move on from the Premier League, let's talk a little bit about Arsenal Villa. And Shev, I'm gonna go to you with this one specifically. What the hell happened?
Uh, well, first of all, it was an incredibly surprising result. Because if that first goal that they scored stood, they would have scored it in like 47 seconds or something like that. One thing about that, let me just sidebar really quickly, but still within the game. That first Villa goal that eventually got ruled out, right? They scored that goal at the 47th second, right? They did their celebration and everything like that. So let's say we're at like a minute and 15 seconds or something of the sort. From a minute and 15 seconds to 6 minutes, or more precisely around 5 minutes, 40 something seconds, the ball did not move. The football was not being played. The players were just standing on the side waiting. Why on earth does VAR take so much time to review these things? That's just my small gripe with it. I understand you want to get things correct. But if you take 5 minutes to review something, at that point, I feel like you're looking for something to chalk off the goal, rather than actually focusing on what might be the infringement. So that was just my little thing, because you have like a situation where 4 minutes, nothing happens on the pitch. So for fans in the stadium, if they were there, that would have been incredibly frustrating. But going back to the game, I just thought we were not very well set up for this game. I don't understand why he played Shaka and Partey in midfield. And I understand that there's a reason that the club chased a player like Alwar so heavily over the summer, is because we are lacking like a creative eight who can press the game forward incredibly quickly and shuttle the ball up the pitch. Danny Ceballos is there. Arteta does seem a bit reluctant to play him in the setup with Thomas Partey. I don't understand why. It was Partey and El Nini, not Shaka, sorry. So I was very confused as to why we were playing Partey and El Neni instead of Partey Ceballos. So that was a strange one. Willian I thought was terrible, and he was great this first game against Fulham, but has really looked out of form since. So I don't particularly understand why Pepe is still on the bench for Willian. And I think the whole Aubameyang on the left, Lacazette through the middle thing has to end at this point. We just need Aubameyang in the middle, flanked by Saka on the left and Pepe on the right. So he, Arteta's young. He's going to make mistakes, and this was a very high-profile mistake to lose 3-0 to Aston Villa at home. But the Saliba thing is quite strange too. I don't understand why he isn't starting games like that, why he's playing for the under-23s, and why they even tried to send him back on loan to Saint Etienne. So that's a weird one for me, considering that I think he can slot in very nicely next to Gabriel and David Luiz in a back three. But going back to, I feel like Mikel just got the team completely wrong, and he's showing too much respect to senior players, in my opinion, who have been underperforming. So Willian, Lacazette, I think it's time for him to really put his foot down, because he has shown that he can be an authoritarian, somebody who's willing to tell players the right thing and make the harsh decisions. You've seen his treatment of Ozil, which, in my opinion, now you can clearly see that it's motivated by something much more than football. Because there's no way Willian can play 10 bad games in a row and still start every game, but Ozil can't even get into the squad. So that's a bigger issue at Arsenal. So I think going forward, he needs to be able to be more expansive against teams like Aston Villa, play for the win. Because he seemed a little bit too cautious, and I think it came back to bite us in the ass.
A lot of people will say Arsenal played poor, but I have a different spin on it. Aston Villa has been playing very well. Grealish and Barkley in the midfield has been working very well. The defense from Aston Villa has been very assuring. The new guy they brought, I think, is Nkogli. He has been amazing for the team, and everything has been working very well. So like when people actually are saying that that Arsenal play, I think the Villa actually did a very good job, and credit must be given to Villa with the start that they had to the season, because this is the second Big Six team that they basically trashed. Liverpool had this 7-2, and now Arsenal with a 3-0. There must be a large amount of credit given to Villa. As it relates to Arsenal, I think the situation with Ozil, I don't understand. I mean, if you don't want the player, you can sell the player. It is very easy. Get rid of the player wages and so on. And you don't need to sell the player for an extremely large amount of money. You could even help to shelf the money, and just so the player will get to move. And you bring in somebody else. There are a lot of good creative midfielders out there that are available. And I don't understand why is it this situation whereby they're just doing like basically casting him out of the team completely. I mean that the reality is that his performances over the last few years has been very poor, but you need a creative spark, and you could actually use him at this point in time where there isn't a lot of creativity. And I think Partey was brought in to actually shore up the central midfield area, so people like Ozil could have had a little more luxury in the team to go forward. But clearly that's not the situation. As it relates to Arsenal, I don't know what direction they're really headed in. A next solution to their problem could be putting Willian in the midfield, in the center attacking midfield, and that might solve some of their issues. But as it relates to creativity across the line, there hasn't been anything. And I believe that them playing Aubameyang on the wing has been killing the team, because normally the winger would add a bit of creativity to the front line, but with Aubameyang is not a creative player. So like I don't really understand what is that happening, why is that happening. But I guess they will need to give Arteta a little more time to figure out if these things that he's doing would actually make sense or not. And until then, basically, they have to just buy the line and wait.
For example, a good thing, like you have Partey in the team. You could play Shaka and Ozil, or Ceballos and Ozil, even against like the even smaller teams. Like there's no reason to be so defensively set against Villa. I understand Villa are flying and they're in form, obviously, but you're playing at the Emirates. You're playing at a so-called smaller club. You need to go and try and win the game. So I was very disappointed with his setup, and I think like I said, he has to show less respect to the veterans of the team and just play players based on merit. Because if that's what you're saying you're going to do, stick to that.
All right. Well, we got a little bit more insight as to what's going on with Arsenal, as we usually do, or have done for the last couple pods. So let's move on to the final game. I guess we're going to talk about in a completely different league. We're moving on to the Bundesliga now. Let's talk a little bit about Der Klassiker. And I'm reluctant to do so for obvious reasons. But so, what do you guys think? Did it live up to your did it, in your opinion, live up to the name? Was it a classic match that you guys expected between two of Germany's biggest teams? And if you guys could touch a little bit on like what the key moments of the match were and what made it such an open affair.
I'm gonna go first and like very quickly because I probably have like the least to say in comparison anyway. Because you two guys obviously have a lot more to say on this game considering there was your teams involved. I thought this game was pretty good actually. I missed the middle like about 15 minutes of it in the second half, like just after Bayern made it 3-1. I missed a little bit of it. So that was tough. I thought Dortmund started this game incredibly well, and I was baffled at the fact that Dortmund did not go more goals up. And I was a little disappointed with Haaland with some of his touches and some of his finishing in the early phases of the game because, we've been talking about this for months and months and months. Bayern are an incredible team, best team in Europe by a mile right now. Like they're so robotic, like that's I mean that in a good way because they're so well run, efficient and organized, but they do have a weakness. And you saw it against Hoffenheim, you saw it against Lyon, even times against Barcelona. They do not like pace going in behind them, and they play so high as a way to keep the ball that if you can get behind them, you have chances. And Haaland had chances before that first Royce goal went in, and I feel like he should have been a lot better with that. And Dortmund went in with the goal, and then I think they got a little gut punched by the goal that Bayern scored. That was a fantastic goal, by the way. I understand that there's a deflection in there, but that set piece routine was great, and I was like, holy shit! When I first saw the goal, I didn't even see the deflection. I was like, holy shit! They just worked an incredible goal there. But Bayern took their goal and they made their chances. And it's just sort of the things that we discussed in the previous podcast because Dortmund had chances. You don't let a team like Bayern Munich off the hook, absolutely not. And it came back to bite Dortmund in the ass, unfortunately. I thought Sané's goal was incredible considering that he came off the bench and he hadn't really gotten going up until that point. So it's just Bayern are incredible. They're near perfect. And if you don't expose that small chink in the armor when they give you a chance, you're going to pay for it. Dortmund paid for it. And at the end of the day, I wanted a competitive match. I sort of wanted Dortmund to win too, I'm not going to lie. But I can't be disappointed with the result because better teams will punish you if you let them off the hook.
No, for sure. Listen, you're definitely right in terms of Dortmund not taking their chances and definitely not being as clinical as they should have been. I will disagree a little bit with how amazing that goal is, and I know Mike is going to have a lot to say about this because we kind of had a conversation about this before we started recording. And it was a goal that definitely gut punched Dortmund, but at the same time, Dortmund really only have themselves to blame for that goal. It was a little bit of luck on Bayern's part, I think, because if there's no deflection, I don't think that goes in. And I know once again, Mike is going to disagree and say, no, it was a well-worked goal. They'd completely planned it. Once again, it didn't seem like that, especially watching it the first time around, or rather once you got a chance to actually look at it and the way it deflected and the way it went in. But even going before that, I feel like Dortmund have this propensity to give away free kicks really close to the box, and I think that's been something that's been going on for quite some time now. I can think of a plethora of matches last season where this happened too. The foul that Delaney had, I believe it was on Coman, completely, absolutely unnecessary. So the guy didn't even have a shot from what I remember on goal, and we somehow managed to, or Delaney rather, still decided to put in the challenge that he did. And you have the situation where Bayern have the opportunity now. You can also talk about how the goal was the ball was deflected. When you're in a wall, and this is something I've talked about with a couple people after the game, when you're in a wall, you don't deviate. the way Meunier in that moment deviates and exposes his back to the ball, that's where you have that deflection coming in. If he doesn't do that, that ball isn't passing the wall. It went. If you look at the way the ball hit him, it went through that gap and bounced off of his back once he turned. So had he just stuck to what I guess would have been the plan, which would have been to stay firm and steady with the rest of the wall, there's no threat there because it would have just smacked into them. Besides that, the game, I am disappointed, but at the same time, if you look at the last few matches, we're probably the only team besides Hoffenheim. I'm not talking about that 4-1. But besides Hoffenheim, that's actually giving Bayern any sort of run for their money. Like, yeah, you could talk about perhaps the Salzburg game in the Champions League, but even they got decimated. So it is good to see that we actually put in a fight, and I think that's the most important thing. I think that's what will build that mentality for Dortmund to go forward and continue to challenge. But you definitely did indicate that Bayern had a great game as well, and I can't deny that as well. I was also in awe of the Sané goal, so I can definitely give Mike props for hyping him up, because there's definitely a reason for that. He is a great dynamic player, and they were just great on the counter, and they really caught us out with that one. Dortmund were pressing for the game at that point, and kudos to Bayern for taking that opportunity. Same thing with the Lewandowski goal for the 2-1. I mean, to this day, I think that was probably. I mean, I knew there was nothing Dortmund could do about it, but one of the worst transfers in Dortmund history in terms of what's given Bayern this sort of dominance. I think Lewandowski is one of the key pieces that gives them that. But the game, once again, it also showed that we do have the fight to go forward and continue to do something this season. The season isn't anywhere near over. And it definitely shows that Bayern can be hurt. And I also wouldn't want to be too hard on Haaland. I know he missed a bunch of really, I guess, big chances, especially the ball that I guess he was trying to lay off to either Reina or Royce in the first half, right before the 2-1 for Lewandowski. He could have either taken the shot on right there and tried to finish, as opposed to trying to pass it. There were a plethora of opportunities, but he is young. He is 20 years old. He will learn from it, and he has the hunger and drive to go forward. So I'm trying not to be too disappointed, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, there's a lot to speak about. Firstly, the goal. Brian tries to say that this goal was not planned, but
It wasn't.
there's a
Okay.
lot of movement that had to happen for that goal to actually happen in the first place. There were like 2 layoffs and then a shot. So you can't just like spontaneously say, you know what, we do 2 layoffs and a shot. It had to be planned before. Additionally, Brian highlighted that the deflection did assist the goal in somewhat, but I believe that the shot would have still gone on target and still would have like led to a goal regardless of the deflection that happened. Because if you look at the shot, it would have fallen directly in between Hummels and Borky. Maybe Borky makes a lunge, but it actually caught Borky by surprise when everything happened, because he thought the wall would have stopped the ball. And every single thing in that move was very surprising. And that is what caught Dortmund flat footed, because the wall didn't even jump properly and there were big gap between the wall. So like it's like after the first layoff, everybody thought that, you know what, Lewandowski would have taken the shot. I think Lewandowski laid the ball off to Muller then, and everybody thought, oh shoot, Muller is going to take a shot. And then Alaba just comes and Muller just lays the ball off to him, and then the shot happened. And in that movement is like a double bluff, and basically no one would have understand what to do. So that's firstly, and I do believe that was a very good move, because normally Lewandowski just goes, takes shots, that's it. Normally Alaba would go, just take a shot, and that's it. But there was a little more degree of complexity within the team. Brian mentioned that the teams give to me for this season. The Offenheim game, I would say that was completely down to tiredness. The match against Sevilla really pushed us to the limits, and the team was very tired. The game that really gave Bayern a push this season was against Lokomotiv Moscow in Champions League. That game was very intense and was a very hard fought game. And to be fair to Lokomotiv, I thought that they had the better chances to win the game. Additionally, Bayern, a lot of people think that Bayern are actually like really, really good and they're pouring in excellence and so on. Bayern midfield has some major problems, and this Kimmich injury during this match in Dortmund does not do us any justice as it relates to that midfield issues that we have, because Roca still needs time to bed in, and then Martinez is way too slow, and then you have a situation where you got Leon Goretzka and Tolisso still is not the player that we would actually expect him to be, because Tolisso is supposed to be taking over the role that Thiago had. And I don't think he is properly fashioned this game into that scenario. And honestly, we really miss Thiago. Sadly, that he had to go, because this could have actually, I think, with Thiago in the team, Bayern next 3 years would have been complete dominance. But that's the situation. As it relates to Dortmund had some really good chances, but they're not clinical, and that is being the situation for Dortmund for a long time. They don't have the mentality to be clinical, and that, I believe, is the reason why Bayern always has the edge over them. When you smell blood, you got to be like a shark and just go and destroy everything. Dortmund had the opportunity to just kill the game off, but they continue to do nonsense as far as I'm concerned, and they give Bayern a chance. Additionally, Bayern does have the weakness with players in behind, and that is why this was Dortmund perfect moment to exploit that. The last time they actually tried to exploit that, Davies' pace actually saved us. But Davies was not in the team this time around, so that is why I believe that they actually went in behind so much without and like much resistance. So with Davies, when Davies is back again, and you get Alba within the back, the pace within that back actually compensates for a lot of things, and that is why Bayern will end up going away. And even in the advent that Alba leaves, I think Lucas Hernandez would play back in that centre back position, and he still have a good amount of pace as a centre back to run in behind. And as it relates to Sane now has gone over to the right, and it is very hard to not make nexuses with him and Robin. The last two goals Sane scored has been like Robin reborn goals. Cuts in, he shoots. Cuts in, he shoots. And that is, we basically got back a Robin clone. With Kimmich, we got back a Lam clone. Now we got back a Robin clone. And it has been amazing. As it relates to Lewandowski moving to Bayern, Lewandowski's Lewandowski. And Dortmund, I don't know why Dortmund allowed the situation to get that bad, but the reality is that with the release clause in Haaland's contract and agent Lewandowski, it would not be out of the realm of possibility that Haaland ends up at Bayern too.
I 100% disagree with that. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's fanciful thinking, especially in terms of Dortmund's change in transfer strategy. I know you went into a really long rant about that goal. I actually just watched it again while you were talking about it. About 5 times, the shot actually goes body level. So no, had Meunier not moved, nothing would have happened. So yeah, you guys did a little bit of a shuffle, 1, 2, 3, whatever. Shows that your tap dancing is definitely on point. But had he not moved, once again, that goal would have not gone in. But anyway, moving on from that, I wanted to talk a little bit about Kimmich's injury and how much you think it'll affect Bayern moving forward, Mike, specifically because he plays such an influential and I guess one could say dirty role for Bayern in the midfield, especially considering the reason he got injured in the first place. It was a pretty stupid tackle. What do you think, Mike?
Kimmich is our central defensive midfielder, and that is the role of a central defensive midfielder. You have to play basically the mop up role. If you go look at Kante and how Kante challenges tackles, they would look like that. Central defensive midfielders are not the cleanest players. They're not this nice silhouette players and so on. They're
Well, no,
not
you
really
don't have to
dirty
be a
players.
silhouette, but you also don't have to go and try and break people's legs or step on
No,
people
but he
throughout
wasn't
games,
going to
which
break
is a
somebody's
trend with
leg.
Kimmich, which is 100% a trend with Kimmich. You definitely have players like Conte. You don't see Conte going into challenges and almost breaking people's legs.
But I really don't understand. Kimmich would have not gone into the challenge intentionally looking to break somebody's leg.
It's not about intention; it's just about stupidity. I just don't think he thinks things through all the time.
Kimmich probably. I think he just angry about what happened. And that's you kind of taking your frustrations out. Kimmich, the challenge that Kimmich made, he was reaching for the ball. There's nothing wrong with reaching for the ball. I really don't see that as too much of an issue. Listen, a lot of times in football and so on, you end up in situations that you would have to push and reach, and that is what happened with Kimmich, and he got injured. It is not a situation whereby Kimmich went studs up and like actually lash onto somebody's foot and so on. He was actually reaching for the ball.
I can definitely point to a specific moment with Sancho a couple, I think 1 or 2 seasons ago that point to a little bit more of an aggressive intent from Kimmich, but I digress. Let's talk a little bit more about what his injury means for Bayern. I think that's a little more important here.
Well, definitely is a significant loss. As I mentioned before, I don't believe Javi Martinez has enough pace to play that role. Javi Martinez has been aging and is not been aging that well. Additionally, Roca that we bought in is not ready as yet. So like it's a major loss. I think Kimmich was probably our best midfielder during this season, if not probably the second best player to Lewandowski during the season. So it's very significant. I really hope that we can adjust during this period because this has now become a very scary period for us because I mean like as in Champions League and so on we basically qualify and Kim should be back by at least January. So like I'm very hopeful that we can progress like nicely through this, just see through this period, and I hope that this gives some like Tolisso more chances so we can actually move forward better. And this is not only a loss for Bayern, but it is a loss to Germany. So like it's significant. Just one thing though, I just want to digress on just one thing.
Go for it.
Brian highlighted something that happened a couple seasons ago on Sancho. I can't remember the incident, but it's fair that you might have a little like pent up anger left in you from that happening. I seriously have no recollection of the incident that you highlighted. But like for instance, right? If we want to revisit things, one of the dirtiest thing I ever see in football is actually from a BVB player, and that was from Lewandowski when he was a BVB player in the finals at Wembley when the referee wasn't looking. Lewandowski actually mashed Boateng leg, stepped on it when nobody wasn't watching. And if you want, you could go back and look at it too.
Well, you can definitely send me that. I'll look into sending you the Kimmich thing. But let's let someone else speak for a moment.
Yeah, a lot of animosity here. I just wanted to highlight like I just wanted to highlight Bayern signings. Like I felt like I went in pretty hard on United, so it would be unfair for me to not say this. But I felt like the signings that Bayern made in this transfer window felt extremely random. I'll start off with Mark Rocca because I've seen him play so much. He's a decent little player. He's talented. But considering that he was a linchpin in an Espanol team that were relegated, and he was supposed to be the guy shielding the back line, I was never quite convinced by him. And I always felt that the signing of him was very strange for particularly a club like Bayern, who needed like an enforcer and a shielder, and somebody who could also distribute the possession from in or out the back. I'm pretty sure he'll play a lot better now that he's surrounded by better players, but I'm still very unsure about him. Another guy that I felt a little bit unsure of was Bunasar. I've heard Julian Laurens talk about him on ESPN's podcast. He's a guy that focuses a lot on French football, and I've never really heard him say anything negative about people that play in the French league. But he himself was not quite convinced by Sarr, and looking at this game, I didn't feel 100% convinced by him either. So I'm interested to see as this season goes on and as squad depth becomes incredibly important, that you need to start drawing players out from all stretches of your squad. how these new signings that Bayern made are going to come in, especially if they have to end up playing crunch games against big teams like Dortmund or in the Champions League as well too. So that's something interesting to see.
As it relates to what Chauvin said, it is very true. I think Roca, we've been checking, like we've been since the season before we attempted to get him out of Espanyol. The opportunity actually came up this time and signed him. As relates to Sar, since Kimmich made the permanent switch now to midfield, we actually wanted cover for the backup position. During last season, we did not have a backup striker, so like that is why we buy Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting. And I think that was generally the decision making behind the signings. It wasn't anything too flashy. So, and then there was Sane. Sane was a quintessential piece to me in Bayern. There was also Douglas Costa, which is going to be a very good squad player for us, and he already understands Germany and so on. So it would be really nice to like get him integrated into the side as a help. His similar role that Perisic had last season, he would actually go and fit into. So like probably if we get like an injury crisis and then we have to really dig deep in our pockets, as it relates to the squad, then we might actually see like these players going out. And I personally don't have a lot of confidence within the players them, but at the end of the day, Bayern is a system, so like they probably would still have great influence within the team.
For sure, Douglas Costa is a good signing indeed for you guys because, like you said, he knows the ins and outs of the team and Germany as a whole. And Leroy Sané, of course, is incredible. But I think in striker and right back, because particularly I don't think like Pavard is a right back. I fancy him more as a central defender or a right centre back in a back three. But looking at striker, where you guys have Choupo-Moting or Kouassi, and then right back, which is Sar, and then the midfield, as you highlighted earlier, is really missing a guy like Thiago, like an enforcer who can push the play and slow it down and speed it up at his will. So it's going to be interesting. I still think that in terms of the starting 11, Bayern are absolutely fantastic, and going forward, they're easily the best team in Europe right now. But like I said, this is an unpredictable season, and when things start to stack up and games start to come quick and fast, a lot of things are going to matter.
100%. The season definitely isn't over, and all the little things are going to add up. And in addition to that, speaking of all those little things, despite my feelings towards Kimmich and and all of that, I do wish him a speedy recovery. I hope he can get back into that Bayern team, and maybe not help them do well this season, but the guy deserves to play. That being said, guys, I think it's a good place to wrap up. Thank you guys for once again being on the pod with me. If you guys could sign off with your socials.
Sorry, I was muted there for a second. This is me, Shevin Ryan. You can find me on Twitter at my first name, SHEVIN_141.
So Michael Philander, all the way from Guyana. By the way, I wish everyone like happy Diwali. So you can find me on Twitter, just Phil's World 003.
And as usual, you guys can find me at Brian E Media 1 on Twitter. Thanks again, guys, for joining me on the pod. And we'll be back soon with some new content.
See ya.